want to tell you about my first DMT experience. But for people that don't know, DMT is dimethyltryptamine, and DMT is what many people think is the main component or substance or compound in ayahuasca. And to a large extent, that's true. There's a lot more involved in ayahuasca than the DMT, however. The ayahuasca brew is a combination of a plant of one variety and a root from another, and they are mixed and brewed. And the reason for that is DMT is not orally active. So if you were to just consume it, it would have no effect. A lot of people also don't know that DMT is produced endogenously. We make it in the body. It's been very difficult to study because it occurs at very levels, and so it's hard to sort of prove where is it coming from, why is it there. But the reality is we make it ourselves, and that should start you thinking. And it also exists in thousands of plants all over the world. So, the question is, did nature put it there for a reason? And my contention is nature doesn't put things there without a reason. So, but if you have to mix these two because the root contains what's called an MAOI inhibitor, which allows the DMT to become orally active so that it can take effect, and that's how ayahuasca works. I have known some shamans talk about taking the root alone without the DMT component as a major healer, and that's why I say that there's a lot more to ayahuasca than just DMT. But there are other ways to consume DMT where it is active, and it is a wholly different experience than ayahuasca, so I wanted to tell you about that a little bit. So this was at a time after my first journey, maybe a couple of years later, when I was thinking about getting called and feeling that I wanted to go back for a journey. And someone introduced me to a shaman who conducted ceremonies. This goes back a number of years now. So I had no intention to take DMT, but I went to this person's house and I was introduced, and we had a really great conversation. He was a phenomenal person. I might talk about him separately. I was so thankful and grateful that he gave me that experience, and he's recently passed. But a wonderful guy, and so we had a great conversation and talking about upcoming ceremony, and that I was thinking of sitting with him. And I had asked him, based on my own curiosity, how about taking DMT alone in the other forms, and how different is that? And I was curious, and he said, well, I have some. Do you want to take it? So I wasn't prepared for this, and DMT is not something that you typically would take. Some people with even a lot of preparation, but not being prepared at all, it was definitely unnerving. But when you have the opportunity and you're a seeker like that, and you have the curiosity that I do, of course I said, okay, yes. And of course, the whole situation was very safe. And he had this really cool setup where he had this special room, and he would give you headphones, and then you would lay in this chair, lay down almost flat, and he had this speaker that he would put by your feet so that you could have this music running through you during the experience. And so here's one way you can take DMT. You can vape it now, but the old school way, and I think for a more potent journey experience, you kind of smoke it like out of a pipe. You need assistance for that because while you're taking it, you can't really hold the pipe and a flame source for obvious reasons. So I sit down, we get ready, and you really try to take 2 to 3 hits. It's very harsh, so if you hadn't been a smoker, it can be really challenging because you have to get enough on board to be able to have what's been called the breakthrough experience. So you take a long hit and hold it as long as you can, and then you let it go, and then try to go for another one. And if you could get to a third one, if you're still able to do that, that's an option for people. So that's what I did. And I started to feel it coming on very strong. And when I got to the third hit, the shaman told me, okay, hold it as long as you can, lean back. And I felt it coming on really strongly. And after the third hit, I leaned back and I could count to 3, 2, 1, and I was gone. It was the first outer body experience, something that I could describe as that I've ever had, including, my previous ayahuasca journey. DMT on its own is really, really potent. Nothing dangerous about it, but physically, but where it takes you can be very hard to process by the conscious mind. So after the count of 3, I am propelled into a space that is completely unrecognizable, and there are the most vibrant colors flowing together like lava. And then I find myself in a sort of an open space, and I think to myself that I'm scared. And at that moment, I felt a presence talk to me without words. And it's what other people describe as telepathic communication. And they said to me, they created essentially a room that had the appearance and feeling of walls around it, and then asked me the question, is that better? And because it had a structure that I was used to, I immediately felt that, yeah, that's more comfortable for me. And it's picture like you're in a room and you have walls around you, except when I turned to the right like this, it was the vacuum of space. And immediately I had a fear response because it was so overwhelming. But right after that, I went to another space, and I can only describe it as heaven. It was the most blissful feeling I have ever experienced in my life. And what was most shocking about it was the familiarity. I immediately knew that this is where I come from. And I was essentially talking to myself and confused that I knew what this place was. In my human mind, I had no idea. The only way I can describe it is that I was home. And it's the feeling like a baby in its mother's arms. It is the most blissful, safe, and happiest feeling you could ever even imagine. It was complete ecstasy and safety. And the knowing that this is where I come from was incomparable to any experience I've ever had. And I was so elated by what was happening that I said to myself, but whoever was listening was responding. I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I have to tell people about this. And this voice said to me, no, you can't tell anybody about this. This is just for you to experience. And immediately upon hearing that, I just relaxed, and it was kind of a short ride. And I remember coming back into the room, and I remember before laying down, the shaman told me, just lay back and close your eyes. But when I came back into the room, I was seeing what was in the room, and I told myself I should close my eyes. But when I said that, I realized that my eyes were closed, and I was in the room, and I was looking at the shaman and my friend who brought me to his house. And I was looking at them. It was sort of chromatic. It wasn't color, but I was in the room. I could see around the room, and I could see them standing over me. And I was back. Afterwards, when I immediately sat up, I tried to talk, and both of them told me, just relax. You know, there's such an urge to speak and relay the experience, but they wanted me to compose myself, relax, breathe, and then talk about it. And the first thing when I was ready, I asked them, you know, how long was I gone? Because I had no idea about the sense of time. And they said it was only about 5 to 7 minutes. And that's sort of the typical length of a DMT journey. And it can be longer based on certain things, but in general, it's a very short-lived, short-acting experience. And I remember when we were discussing it and I was leaving, I just reached out and I gave him a huge hug, and I said, I'm so grateful for what you have just done for me. I appreciate it so much. And I understood at that moment that being his life's work, that there could be nothing more rewarding than that to do for people. And I think for me, that was the start of my understanding that that's also what I wanted to do for people. And the other thing I can describe physically is that my third eye had opened. And it's exactly what you may have heard before. It's right here in the forehead between your two eyes, and it was pulsating, like hard, almost like it was continually getting like tapped, like boom, 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 boom. And that feeling actually stayed with me during the entire car ride home when my friend was driving, maybe for about a half an hour after that. The feeling that has stayed with me for all these years is that I knew at that very instant that we do not die. It confirmed for me for the first time in a physical experience that we are soul beings having a human experience, and that whatever that place was, which I call heaven, based on your religious experience, other people may have different explanations for it, but I believe that to be true. And it confirmed for me that we are everlasting, and where we go when we leave this earth is home.